all so much for staying.
Thank you so much.
I figured everybody would just take off.
Yeah, that's a good sign. Good sign. Yeah, so just those two questions. Just curious to know, do you want to ask those questions? Do you want to hear that? So, is there something that you particularly liked or loved? And then anything you found particularly confusing? Yeah?
I love, a song like that, just the way that all of the voices came together had such a dramatic tinge to it. I almost wanted it to come back.
Oh, yeah, are you gonna write that down?
So she loved the metal song when the three were acting as
Yes.
the kind of one voice for the 138. Yeah?
Which, thank you for saying that, because that was one of those things when I was writing this. I was like, how do three guys create the commotion of what actually took place that day? And I just was really hemming and hawing. And then I heard Chris, if you haven't heard Chris's albums, you should go and find them because they're stunning. But he wrote a song for his daughter called I Love You to the Moon and Back, and that's not far enough.
Heard that, yeah.
And I listened to it, I was like, oh my God. And then all of a sudden I just went, what if he just became a cowboy and the lights go down and he just sings the story of the massacre? So I said, pages 40 to 45, Chris, look at it. I just want you to tell a tale as a cowboy. And I thought he was just going to do an individual song. And he went into the studio and he put the backup voices on and he did the moaning voices in the back. And he sent it to us 4 days later. And I was like, oh my gosh.
It was truly, I mean, there was no question that it was exactly the right thing.
And that's when I knew the show was going to work on some level because, I mean, his music is obviously just stunning. But it blew me away when we got that. You know,
Thank you for saying it.
I feel my strength in you also, the woman's song.
Find My Strength in You.
Find my strength in you. I love
Yeah.
that.
And that was, Mike wrote the lyrics for that, and we sent it to Chris. And again, the next day, he sent that song back. And then we went up to Whitefish and recorded it with Ross in the studio. So I'm a little hoarse. It's been a long week, but it's a beautiful song.
Yes?
I like the story about the Mormons and something. My great was, and I learned a little bit more about the seeing of the city all the time. And learned just a lot about their culture.
And as you were singing the songs, I was thinking about the beauty of that state and also what the Mormons went through to get to where they are. I was just
The founding story of the Mormons.
There's a ton of history in that. You know, Joseph Smith started in New York.
Right.
And then they built in Missouri, they built a city there, and then it was a fight over a printing press that Joseph Smith destroyed because they were printing all these horrible things about the Mormon religion. And that caused the town to uprise and arrested him and eventually shot him in a jail cell, and he fell, which is what caused the Mormons to move on farther. But after Joseph Smith was killed, there were four sects. It divided into 4 sects of Mormons that tried to take over. Brigham Young went west, some went to Canada, and some went south. So it was a very tumultuous development of a religion, and it's one of the few religions that we have history of. Like the Catholics go so far back, and all that the history is, we're not sure if it's really true or not. But with the Mormons, things were documented, and so you actually see this religion come into being. So I agree with you. It's fascinating, and that's also hard with the show, is like, how much history do you write? And it was very fact-oriented, and these guys were like, okay. And I was like, so we try to make it more human and pick people from these places to tell the story as those people, if that makes sense. But
And it was much more active. It did a great job of activating a lot of this text, from narration to scene work. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, great work.
that was thanks to Dan.
Steve, Jane, David?
I didn't know it was historically accurate first. I mean, that's probably important to put up front. I thought you really had done a job on Mormons.
So he didn't know it was historically accurate, and he but they really did a job on Mormons.
No, I don't know how some people might take it in a lot of ways.
How some people might receive it, sure.
What would Mitt Romney's reaction be?
Well, I think part of the point was, it
Corporations are
was
people too.
and they repressed this
Still.
still.
It's really the tragic part is that, it's just not talked about in the Mormon church, and there's just not much of a reality to them that it even happened.
It's
So,
a story kind of like Killers of the Flower Moon, wouldn't you say?
yes,
It was kept under wraps for
yep.
years.
Well, they didn't bury anybody, and Brigham Young refused to let people go up there. And some people went up after and buried 30 people in a mass grave and put rocks over it and put a cross on it that said, "Vengeance is mine." And Brigham Young personally went up and took the cross and said, "Vengeance is indeed mine," and took it and threw the rocks away. So it was, when we say vow of secrecy, they took it across the board. And when Billy says they're not even talking about it, they're just riding around in all the wagon train's riches.
As we learned this week, there's a plaque. How big is it? There's a plaque. That still really doesn't fully take responsibility, but it does acknowledge that it at least happened.
And that wasn't put up until the 90s, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it was just really recent. It was over 100 years before anybody would even acknowledge it.
Jane?
I'm a professional storyteller, so I looked at this from a story viewpoint. And I just have a couple of suggestions for you to think about. When you're gathering characters at the beginning, it was a little bit disjointed. And if there's a way that you can string those character pearls together a little bit more clearly, it's wonderful that all the characters show up later and brings you full circle.
From the opening number.
But in the beginning, there's like this character, and then all of a sudden this character, and then this character. So
In the song.
I don't really have a suggestion, but how to do it, but to bring those characters into the family that they end up being at the end. Okay, and then the other thing is that it's such a terrible event in history. I think that if there's a way that you can make the reason for the revenge a little bit clearer. You have the story of Eleanor and Pratt and Hector at the beginning, and we kind of leave them in Arkansas. And then there's I think it was in the song where there's a reference that Pratt's death is going to be revenged. But if you could connect it more clearly to then the gathering of the militia, and that's the fuel, that's the reason why Brigham Young said, let's do this.
Mm-hmm.
Those are my two suggestions.
Those are excellent, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
so some confusing things that need some clarity.
Yeah. And I love the song, The Church and State.
Church and state. Yes, Steve, we'll come right back to you. David, you have
He
a...
just wrote that. We're like, how does this go?
That's great.
I think it kind of partners with some of this, that I think there are some musical opportunities, you probably know this already, there are musical opportunities of connecting characters, and I thought Find My Strength is one of those, because listening to that text, if you were singing that to the sky instead of your partner, the words equally are equally justified. That if you use tunes like that as a connective tissue of different perspectives of the world,
Right.
It makes that, the fact that it's all human beings at the core of this, a little more cohesive, which might help with some of that clarity. So I just wrote Find My Strength reprise, just because it's such a strong tune and a strong sentiment. And I feel like each character has where they find their strength in a different way. I also, if that happened in the beginning, I'm so sorry we were a little late. But yeah, just
No, that happens once in the show, so
okay.
that's excellent.
Yeah.
We're kind of trying to see, honestly, he's written so many great musical pieces that it definitely, there need to be themes throughout, things need to repeat, things need to come back. Then we need to, I think, identify a lot of these characters with a theme, with a song.
Yeah.
So that's a goal.
Well, and you know, to have underscoring would help a lot, like you say, to clarify these things and stuff, but we just didn't have enough time.
Steve, you had another
Yeah.
Yeah, I
point of
don't know.
confusion?
Hector confused me.
Hector confused
He
you?
went- he came in here, went to California, came back.
Yeah.
I don't know how he fit in with the whole event that occurred up in
He
Salt
caused the
Lake.
whole thing, Steve.
Yeah.
His killing, he killed Parley P. Pratt,
Which is how they, you know, they took revenge against that murder on the wagon train.
and the wagon train had already left. The wagon train was well into Cherokee territory, but the Mormons said they murdered Pratt and then they got out of town to avoid it. And they're coming here, we can do this, you know,
It
retribution
wasn't clear to
here.
me.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
murder was the reason it happened.
We can do better.
That was,
for sure.
they justified the whole happening with that one murder.
Okay.
And that's why at the end, and we need to clean this up more, but Hector sings, I gotta quiet my head, I gotta find some rest, I got all this pain sitting on my chest. And then actually Billy sings that at the end of the show. When his dad says, let it go, and he goes, I can't, I gotta find some rest. So he becomes Hector, and that's why Billy at the end of the show says, I never even met Hector McLean. But Hector McLean is the reason Billy died. And it's how we're all connected, how our actions affect everyone,
Still to this day.
Right.
you know.
That wasn't clear.
I know, that's a really good point. We need to bring that up, but that is the goal of our show, of this one man's pain, is how if you don't take care of yourself, it affects people that you don't even know years later. And also that Eleanor story, Eleanor Hector, that was a 14-year story. That was the story that got me interested in this. And Eleanor, as a woman in 1857, when her husband, her loving husband, became an angry drunk, and she did everything she could to get those children out of there. The story's amazing. I mean, her name is Eleanor McComb. If you can Google her. A lot of what she says in the play was actual stuff taken from the courtroom. The puke on his shoes and the untold tears between the setting and the rising sun. I was like, oh my God. But she was literally the only woman in that courtroom, and she stood up for herself. And it was just amazing. But, you know, how do you take 14 years of a woman's strength and put it in a 6-month show?
I think Vince might speak to that point.
I'm connected to the end too, like so many folks are. And structurally, I'm looking at it, and I think some of the information you have at the end could be set up in the beginning. I don't know as an audience member who I am or why I'm watching this. And I don't know what question I should be investigating as an audience member. It strikes me that it's Billy who really takes our trajectory. And it would be really helpful, I think, at the very beginning, as the narrative voice, as the person telling the story, to ask the question. It seems implicit but not explicit that the question is, who are the saints and who are the sinners? It's almost like a court piece. Who's guilty here? And I think if that were my question, then each scenario I could see as weighing in on each side. And as an audience member, I could be coming to a conclusion. So I think setting us up for what to watch for, scenario to scenario, would help the trajectory. And then that Meadow song is so beautiful, that I want to go to the ocean, it's a classic I want song. And I think if it were in the beginning, so we understand that what all these people want is to be in a place of peace with their families. And then we're tracking them trying to get there, and then Billy not accomplishing it and turning to us and saying, why? Who's guilty here? That would help us emotionally get through the arc of your story. And then if we do have a little lack of clarity with who's who, the clarity of your emotional arc will get us to the end. Because it's so beautiful once we get
So that also means the I want rather than the way, way west, because it represents all of them. And very interesting.
Way Way West is the first action that they take based on what they want.
That's great.
Right. That opening song.
Cause first.
We've got that opening song, this is the story of this is the story of this, talking about the characters, etc. What are your thoughts about that?
I like it. I just think order-wise, I don't, it's sort of like Hamlet. I've got to know that Hamlet has to decide whether he's going to kill Claudius or not to track all the everything. And so I need that ghost to show up and ask the question. And I don't have that before the introduction of character. So I don't know I'm asking the question about who are the sinners and who are the saints when I'm meeting everybody to sort them out. So I don't know why I'm meeting everybody.
Right.
Hey, Vince, would that then move the Wayway West more into like the journey?
It's the point of attack.
Okay.
It's when they leave for the journey. Like, if we think of the I Want and the introduction of Billy as the introduction, then you have a clear point of attack. You have really beautifully escalating complications. Your crisis is the valley, and your climax is really being killed.
Great.
That's
One more
excellent.
thing on monologue.
Yeah, please.
You introduced the ghost idea very late, and it feels a little like a Chekhov gun. It needs to come much earlier. And I think in your beginning, when you're introducing everybody, this idea of the ancestors are always with us would help set up then when an ancestor comes back that it's not just a playwriting trick, but it's part of the fabric of your storytelling.
Can I ask just real quick? Did anybody have a feeling of who the wayfaring stranger was at the beginning?
The narrator?
Yeah.
Yes,
Chris?
the wayfaring stranger. He's narrator, wayfaring stranger. Yeah.
Yeah.
The first voice you hear in the show. The whistler. Yes.
I wasn't sure who the protagonist was, so I thought after a little while this must be the protagonist, and therefore he's Billy. But I don't know that that's what you were going for. But
I was with Frank on that.
Yeah, no, it all ties into exactly what Vince just said. It's clarity up front. Who's the story about? What's the question, and then how does it get answered?
Right.
They've been dancing with this all week, and yeah, but great stuff. Great.
Because there are 5 stories. We include 5 stories in the piece, and they are all connected in some way. So that's a lot to ask.
I think the other thing on that is, because we just added this, it was Dan and Ryan's bold suggestion of this making the narrator somebody as opposed to just a narrator.
Point of view.
So when his first line is, "I was there in 1857," I remember when that arrow went through my chest. So that, I guess I'm saying is that's not a clear thing that it needs to be, I mean, we only worked on it a couple days because it's a very new idea, but so that needs to be more expanded.
Yet they don't even know who he was.
At all.
So that's not.
That's,
Who is he?
he was one of the survivor, or one of the people that was killed in the massacre that has come back to tell the story, so to make, because the story is still not told. So he's actually a person from the massacre. I was there that day in September in 1857.
So the 3
I remember
people
the arrow going in my chest.
the 3 people that are set up in silhouette,
That's, everybody keeps saying that.
the 3 people that are set up at the beginning in silhouette are all people who died in that massacre. 3 men that died in the massacre. Or 3 women. We didn't tell this, but ideally with the show, we want it to be a cast of storytellers. Doesn't matter their sex, it doesn't matter their gender, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's just, it can be any formation of a cast, which I think is cool, you know, women playing men, men playing women, that kind of thing. So that's one of our goals with this too, is that it covers everyone.
There's a beautiful thing though with Billy that I just want to underscore, that if he is the wayfaring stranger who shows up at this theater tonight to tell us this story, he is the messenger completing the Pony Express. He's finally delivering the message. So it's in the text. It's beautiful. So I would encourage that to be like, that's why we're watching. This is a historic moment. The message is delivered.
Yes, thank you, Vince.
Yes, and I would just throw in, that's a really powerful moment in the beginning when he says, the arrow went through my chest, I didn't know if I should be grateful or angry, is that right? And I thought that's the arc we were going on, that he would be angry in the beginning and grateful at the end. And so that's why I projected him onto the wayfaring stranger, but I wasn't totally sure.
You're getting there.
It's just a wonderful foundation of incredibly powerful storytelling here. I think it's, you know, as Vince was describing, creating a structure that connects all this stuff, that connects these 5 stories, and just brings meaning to it all at that climactic moment. And it's extraordinarily powerful, that opportunity there, once you sort of get these pieces in order and stuff. It's beautiful music, and the music of something this dramatic as a massacre just elevates the emotion to a place that I don't think a play could. And that's extraordinary.
I'm sorry I interrupted you earlier, I couldn't hear you over there.
Me?
Yes.
Oh, I was just saying, like, could he be Billy? Could the wavering stranger, rather than wavering stranger, could he be just what they were saying? Yeah.
And these guys, that was definitely a thing that was discussed a lot. And I think my thing was like, well, he can't be an old man, but we're all playing different ages and stuff. So it could be, he could be played by an older, I mean, I played.
Yeah,
So,
you played beautifully.
so he, sure.
I believed you were a little boy.
You know, I like to play kids.
There you have lots of hands up front row.
Musically, I love it. There's a piece where you have Buchanan and Young, and there's such disdain between Buchanan and Young in history. I mean, these two really hated each other. And I don't think that comes up really clear in your story. It's hinted at. And the reason for sending the cavalry out to Salt Lake was the hate. And if that could be expanded some way, I think that would make a little bit stronger evidence about why this massacre also occurs. Because that has a piece to it.
Oh yeah, that was definitely a catalyst. That's what Brigham Young used to incite the Mormons who had gone through 2 years of drought, 2 years of Reformation, and then he was even into blood atonement. And then he was making everybody get baptized again because he said, God's doing this because you're not strong enough as a Mormon. So everybody had to be rebaptized. So there was a desperation.
Yeah,
it was a perfect storm.
Yeah, but it feels like there needs to be a little bit more tension with that somehow.
And we hoped that moment would be, a little bit of light comedy in the middle of darkness. And the idea, if we make it, modern day.
Well, you can do dark comedy.
Trump and Biden or whatever, a debate between, make it, it's stuff we still hear today. And they're saying ridiculous things.
Yep.
So comedy would be cool, but to make it darker somehow.
Well,
more realistic.
Just more pointed and more angry.
More, yeah.
As opposed to darker.
I think it's saying a clearer point of views, and musically that could have still kind of the same tune, just the juxtaposition of the two characters is what we're saying.
This is great stuff. Thank you guys.
So let's go with Matt, Jane, and then we have a friend. So Matt.
I was going to piggyback on some of what's happening and also just suggest if you guys decide how to set up who's playing what and the device of I'm playing the boy, I'm playing the men, I'm playing that you're the lead. This is a reading, so we didn't get to see kind of the physical nature of the staging.
Exactly.
But that, how you set it up, some people believe, the most important part of your show is the first 10 seconds. So if you figure out how to do that, whether it's in staging, whether it's telling the audience that you're Billy,
well, there was,
that makes it so specific, because I didn't drop into this until the story about Hector dragging his wife out. The Way Way West song, I'm not sure where that goes, if anywhere. And I would maybe suggest what Vince was saying. What if when we meet the wagon train men that we, when they first meet, who are those characters again?
Honey
Will-
Fancher and William Miller.
That's
Billy's
right.
dad. And Honey Fancher ran the wagon train, and he sadly had been back many times, but this time he took his whole family, so they all were all killed.
What if you do a preamble of that song you sing later on, the ocean song, but it has different lyrics of hope. We hope for the meadow, we hope for the mountains. And then by the end, they're saying, God damn, I wish we could swim in the ocean again. All we want to do is live with our children. That there's a dichotomy to those needs, those I wants. It was one thing in the beginning, and then it became a different thing. But once again, going back to how to distinguish right in the beginning who you are, what devices you're using. 3 actors, we're all playing all the parts, that kind of thing. The clearer that is, the better.
Yeah, so I hear a lot of the same.
Yes.
And then you can get that circle round that Vince is talking about as well.
This is amazing.
Jay?
I'm just going to suggest a little edit so that we don't wander down a side street with Eleanor and Hector. I don't know that the whole part about the kidnapping of the children moves the storyline that you want along. That's the hard part about being a storyteller, is that you fall in love with pieces that don't need to be there.
That story is about half of the when I wrote it. It was that.
But I don't think that, I think that, then all of a sudden we're all too focused on the Hector story.
Sure.
And the Hector is a prop for the big story of revenge.
Yes. Yes.
So I would just take out the kidnapping part.
You should have seen the first draft. I had her going up the river on the boat, on the wagon train, took a wagon train.
Carl, right behind you, Carl, and then we'll go to Carl.
The character that drank a lot, was that Hector? I got kind of a little confused about that. And then Hector was, what happened to Hector? He got murdered or something.
She said the character that drank a lot, what happened to him? Honestly, he stayed in Arkansas, and he wasn't even arrested for killing Harley Pratt. He just shot him, and everyone, you shouldn't have done that. He goes, I know. And they went and got a drink. So, and Eleanor stayed in Salt Lake, and one of her children became a Mormon and stayed with her, and the other 2 children didn't really speak to her after that.
Okay, that's what I...
Yeah, these characters, to pick, of the characters that you saw today, there were another 50 characters that we could have used.
Right.
That time was so full of rich, inspired people that had so much courage. And so to pick the people that we decided to tell our story, it was really difficult. And then, like I said, especially with Eleanor, so much of her dialogue was factual. And I just found it so hard to cut it because I was so inspired by her. But once we started cutting it, I was like, okay, that's not the story. You're right, you're correct.
Yeah, I think it could be speaking to the point of even then the subplots arcs need to be explored, so maybe they resolve as well.
She could have her own musical.
Yeah.
You know
The
what?
story of Eleanor.
She should, absolutely. Yeah.
Go to Carl.
I really like the music, and I particularly like the, whatever you would call it, the joining harmony with so please keep that part of it. I'm not suggesting you don't keep everything, but I really, I just know what I like, and I really like the music, and particularly the harmony that you had there.
Love the music.
Yes,
and
very
the
good.
harmony. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we'll do 2 more questions. Anne?
I loved it. Excuse me. I thought, oh goodness, just a minute. Goodness.
Wait a second, we'll come right back. Go ahead.
I was thinking, man, this is really a downer of a story. And does a downer of a story make it as a musical? Then I thought, well, wait a minute, Sweeney Todd's kind of downer. West Side Story, yeah. So yeah, I think the thing about a successful musical, and I also want to comment on the music, is that you have to have songs that have really powerful hooks. And you have that. The Way West, Way West, I thought was a terrific song. And the wife's song to the husband on that. But I was curious about Wayfaring Stranger, because that's a song in the public domain, kept the lyrics and changed tune. Do you know what the thought was in not keeping the original tune since it's public domain? Have to ask that.
Oddly, Chris said to us this week, he said, I'd never heard the song before, I just wrote it. I was like, I loved it the first time I heard it. I'm going there.
He thought we wrote the lyrics too.
The original tune is stunning. It's gorgeous. It just goes right into the heart.
I'm familiar with the Ralph Stanley version.
It's
Bluegrass.
It's
I
gorgeous.
am a poor wayfaring stranger.
So why, you gave him the lyrics and then he put a tune to it and wasn't aware of the original tune?
But it's
Yeah,
really
this is the
interesting.
first time these four gents have been in the same place at the same time. Yeah, so that's some
Well, not
of
the
it.
first, but it's one of the first we've had a chance to. As a Baptist preacher's child, I knew that song. I mean, I'd always heard it in my life. And I'm surprised how many people have never heard of that song.
And there's also, Alison Krauss does a version that, forget about it. It's just like,
Okay, final comments.
I can talk now.
Ann, go ahead.
Sorry. I did love it. I particularly loved the music. I knew so little, I realized, about the history of the Mormons. I just knew so little. So that was fascinating, and I really was getting into that. I think kind of in the vein of some of the things that Jane was saying, I was a little confused by the different characters as to where they are, when they are, and in my mind I kept thinking that Billy was the one that would help me, get through to follow the plot line, and I think that's already been talked about. But the character of Billy, I thought was wonderful, and the way he was able to just keep it on.
Incredible. Yeah, it's really it must be wonderful to hear.
It's amazing.
Kind of the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, it helps.
Yeah. One final comment here, Steve.
I'd love to see what you've done, and maybe come back in a year or two and give it back to us.
Well, that's good. Sometimes the third question is this something you'd like to see or hear more of? And, just in case somebody said no, I didn't want to answer that question, but Steve has answered yes, he would like to hear more of this. Just incredible. So they absolutely will continue to work and
It'd be fun to see
and
how it
discover
evolves
and
over
This will
time.
be on stage for sure.
these were all amazing comments. Thank you. Really, really helpful.
well, thank you to you gentlemen for the incredible work that
If you want to continue to give your thoughts or comments, Mike at thewayway.west.com. And I would love to read any additional thoughts or anything that you might, suggestions, whatever, just please. And then if you sign up there, you can keep up with our progress, what we're doing, the growth of the piece. So thank you so much for what you've done
You
today.
can contact me if you want to get a hold of Mike. We'll continue to talk about it and work on it. Sounds like that's what folks would like to do. So thank you.
Thank you
so
for
much
coming
being
so
here.
much.
Thanks for doing this.